Welcome to America Open House, the show that takes us to America's historic homes that are open to the public. Each program opens a window into the past, becoming an architectural forensic journey, examining the house and the way it was built and the lives of the people who lived in it. Today we visit the Nathan Hale Homestead, home of the martyr spy, in Coventry, Connecticut, built in 1776 at the height of the Revolutionary War. This beautiful stone wall tells us we're in rural New England. Hi, I'm Wade Treadway, your host for America Open House. We're here in Coventry, Connecticut at the Hale Homestead. This house is unique for the period due to several features: the twin chimneys, the central hall, and the long L behind. We're here to investigate the house and three individuals connected with it: the builder of the house, Richard Hale, his son, the famous Nathan Hale, and George Dudley Seymour, the man responsible for the restoration and preservation of the house. Among the items that George Dudley Seymour was able to procure is the diary of Enoch Hale, Nathan's brother, which details very accurately the construction of the house. So let's start our tour where they started, in the basement.
"1776, May 9th. Begin our cellar just north of the old house. May 23rd, folks busy stoning the cellar."
We know from Enoch's diary that the digging of the cellar started on May 9th, 1776. He also makes reference in May 23rd of folks stoning up the cellar. They were stoning it up with fieldstone and quarried stone, which they gathered here on the property. We know it's a mixture because we can see tool marks on several of the stones indicating that they were split and quarried out of solid granite further back on the property. And yet we do have many stones which were just natural field stones dug up during the plowing of the fields. The mortar that you see in place is a modern addition. The original foundation would have been dry laid, meaning that no mortar would have been used in its construction, similar to the building of the farm's stone walls. The meticulous manner in which these stone walls were constructed is really a reflection on the values of Richard Hale. For these stones, the enemy of the plow in the field, rather than being plucked out of the field and cast aside, were placed in a very deliberate manner to form all of the fencing around the farm. All of the paddocks and all of the fields are bound by these stone fences. We've seen from the exterior of the house that there are twin chimneys. This is part of the center hall design. Behind me you can see the far corbelled chimney stack, which supports the chimney and all of the fireplaces above. It's what I refer to as corbelled, and corbelling means the layering out of the material, in this case stone. And what this is doing is it's not only supporting the hearths of the fireplaces above, but it's also supporting this member here, which is the chimney girt, which carries all of our floor joists. Now the corbelling of the base is worth noting. Not only is it a stepping out of the material, but the craftsmen who built this also used chisels to shape the stone with a curve to fit the curve of the corbelling. We can tell also from down here in the basement that the frame of the house is hand-hewn. We can tell that by these very distinct cuts in the timber, which are left from the scoring axe, which is part of the process of hewing. This is in very sharp contrast to the marks that were left on a subfloor board, which were sawn on a vertical saw. Now we're going to see much more of the frame in the attic, but first I want to show you a demonstration of the hewing process. Everyone that hews timbers has their own technique, but in essence they're all the same. And that is, you start with a felling axe. With this axe, you're going down the log and you're cutting all of the grain as you go down, so that when you come down through with your broad axe, which is this larger axe, you're really not cutting the log. You're actually just paring away all the chips that have been created by your scoring. And the definitive marks that we find, as we did on the joist in the basement, are the marks left by the scoring axe as it goes down through cutting the grain. The attic area reveals a great deal to us about the construction techniques in building the house. We see up here that the whole roof deck is supported by a series of common rafters. These rafters are all hand-hewn, just as the framing members were down in the basement. These are connected by a series of collar ties, but they're sawn, which tells me that there was a sawmill in close proximity to the house. These collar ties are connected to the rafter by means of a mortise and tenon joint. The tenon goes into the rafter and then is pinned with the peg. Now we know the exact day that the frame was raised, and it was all done in one day, June 4th, 1776. In fact, Enoch's diary is so precise, we know that they finished raising the frame at 20:05 in the afternoon.
June 4th. Invite hands to the raising. Ride about 15 miles and return with Reverend Huntington and Madam and bring Sister Rose. Afternoon, help raise. Finish by 4 hours, 40 minutes.
Let's go outside and look at some exterior details. George Dudley Seymour bought the Hale Homestead in 1914. He spent about a year surveying the house, investigating it, and it was in a very dilapidated condition. One of the first things he did during its restoration was to replace the entire east side clapboarding, the clapboarding being the wooden fabric on the outer wall. In doing so, George Dudley was very exact. He used exactly the same material, a pine clapboard, and he also fastened it and located the clapboarding exactly as the originals. A couple of things that are very interesting to note are, one, the use of a feather edge joint. This is where the clapboards have been cut on an angle on the end grain and secured with a single nail. This prevents air infiltration from getting behind the clapboards. The other thing that's very interesting is the use of graduated clapboards. This means that we have a much lower exposure of the clapboard on the lower course, and we gradually gain in exposure as we move up the wall. This was done to protect the lower framing members, most notably the sill and the lower ends of the studding. The other thing that was done in the restoration was the use of hand-forged nails. Now we know from Enoch's diary that procuring nails for the construction of the house was no easy matter. He made 3 separate trips to Windham, Glastonbury, and Hartford after nails. Only in Windham was he able to procure a few nails. What he was going after were blacksmith-made, hand-forged nails. And these are typified by having a very continual taper down the shank to a very sharp point. This was drawn out by the blacksmith with the steel being hot from the forge and hammering it on his anvil. After that was done, he then turned it, cut it, and then headed the nail. This particular one is what we call a figure 8 or a butterfly pattern head, and it, along with the most commonly known rose head nail, was done with 4 blows of the blacksmith's hammer to create the head. Now, it's easy to speculate that with the house being constructed during the Revolutionary War, that maybe the nail shortage was due to the scarcity of steel. Only speculation, we don't know for sure.
August 1st, ride to Hartford. Reverend Strong talks of going as chaplain. And get some wine for sacrament, but no nails, no white lead.
While we're on the exterior, I'd like to draw attention to the L of the house. The L behind the house is one of the first examples of continuous architecture. Continuous architecture was born out of a need within the agricultural community for doing many different services under one roof. What we have in the Hale L is, first off, coming from the main house, the kitchen, hence the massive chimney which is supporting the fireplace and bake ovens. We then go to a woodshed, poultry shed, and on the very end was actually the ice house that was used. Now, there is some speculation that the Hale's original house was actually part of the L, and this is really how continuous architecture was started, however, many years later, and that is adding a bigger, newer house onto the original. The Hale house was the first house built in Coventry with a central hall design. Norman Isham, one of Connecticut's leading authorities in domestic architecture, was very surprised to see a house of this design, for its date, in such a rural setting. This was a design that was becoming popular on the seacoast. It was a design that was expensive to build because we were building the 2 twin chimneys as opposed to a central chimney, which had been the norm up until this point. What the central hall achieves is a greater accessibility into the house. We can approach the house and have total accessibility to any of the rooms on the first floor. Now, this was very important in Richard Hale's design because he had many different functions planned for the various rooms on the first floor. Let's take a look at this from the inside. The most apparent advantage to the central hall design is easy accessibility into the various rooms, not only on the first floor, but the second floor as well, with a clean sweep up the center stairway. When Richard Hale built the house, it served not only as the focal point for the farm, but also for the various civic functions that Richard was engaged in. Let's take a look at the room that's known today as the classroom. The full raised panel wall is typical of all 4 rooms on the first floor. The raised paneling, the thumbnail molding, and the bold bolection molding all surround the fireplace opening. This is all quarried cut granite, resting on very massive hearthstones. These stones are supported on the corbelled chimney base that we saw in the basement. We refer to this room as the classroom because David Hale, Nathan's younger brother, taught local school children here. He also, after a period of time, developed a boarding school and had students staying on the 3rd floor. One of the things that was uncovered during the George Dudley Seymour restoration is the original blackboard that David used. Richard Hale put a very high value on education. He sent both Nathan and Enoch to Yale College when Nathan was only 14. Enoch and Nathan graduated from Yale in 1773. George Dudley was very fortunate to find a proclamation of the graduating class which has Enoch and Nathan's name on it, and that again is from 1773. Both Enoch and Nathan continued on in education, as was typical of the time. Enoch going to Lyme, Connecticut to teach, and Nathan going to Haddam. Let's go take a look at the dining room. The dining room is located behind the schoolroom on the first floor. The inclusion of a dining room in the floor plan was really quite unique for the period. And yet the design of the house with the L going off the back afforded just such a feature, because we know that the main kitchen for the house was located in the L, as was the pantry. This room was used as a dining room. Now, in all probability, in the coldest days of the winter, this was used as a kitchen room, because this is a very large fireplace and because of the crane which supports the pots. It's also more of a utilitarian room. We can see by the paneling that it's, although the same raised panel with thumbnail molding as the previous room, it's less detailed. We lack the bolection molding that surrounds the fireplace. There is some speculation that this paneling may have come out of the original Hale house, but we really haven't defined that as such at this point. The use of this room as a dining room was important in several reasons. One, we had the farm and farm hands. We had a large family with the Hale family, but again, remembering that David, being the school teacher, had boarding students, and they also needed a place for dining. This is where, again, the layout of the house came in very handy, because we have a separate entry from the side coming directly into the dining room, and we also have access from the classroom, which would have made it very easy for the students coming from class into the dining area. One of the things in this room which is very unique is Nathan's fowling piece. This is the rifle he used on his hunting expeditions with his brother Enoch. Let's go take a look at the judgment room. The judgment room is directly across the hall from the dining room at the back of the house. It is called the judgment room because it was here that Richard Hale and Nathan's younger brother David discharged the duties of justice of the peace. No doubt the back entrance was used to gain access. The room itself is again very utilitarian, as was the dining area. We notice the large fireplace and again the full raised panel wall. We're very fortunate to have this portrait of Richard. It's interesting to note that it's signed Mr. Richard Hale, Coventry, 1740, which is 5 years prior to his purchasing this property in 1745. Among the more valuable possessions in this room are the tall clock, which was made by Daniel Burnap from Andover, Connecticut. We also have a writing arm Windsor, which no doubt Richard used to write on when he did his court documents. We also have, as a feature of the twin chimney design, closets on either side of the fireplace. This far one was used for storage of documents from the court cases and family and farm records. We also have this closet on this side, which was used for storage. However, it was converted at a later date to be a passageway into the front parlor. Definitely not part of the original plan, this passageway was created by removing the shelves of the chimney cupboard. This gave a private access from the judgment room into the formal parlor. For Richard Hale deeded this half of the house to his son John and his wife Sally, and this gave them a privacy access between the two rooms. Now we note in here that the paneling is a little more refined than we've seen in the rest of the house. It's almost approaching a federal design with the fluted pilasters, more delicate moldings, and even the firebox itself, we're seeing bricks encasing the whole box as opposed to the cut granite we saw in the other rooms. Now this is entirely possible that this room was finished at a later date, because we know that the family moved into the house in October 31st, 1776, and yet in Enoch's diary he does make mention of his two brothers, Jonathan and Joseph, gathering hearthstones on December 31st, 1778. So the building process, the finishing process of the house was really continual. So I would suspect that this is a little bit later than the rooms we've previously seen. Now this room contains many Hale objects. A lot of what we see in front of us belonged to Joanna, the youngest sister of Nathan. Her china, her chairs, which we're seeing as being sort of a newer design. We're coming now into the 19th century. We're also very fortunate in having a portrait of John Hale, brother of Nathan. This piano fort is not of the period. This was brought in by George Dudley Seymour early in this century. He was not only a great antiquarian, but a great lover of music. It's appropriate that the sheet music on the piano fort is departed days. Of all the Hale objects that the house holds, probably the ones that capture our imagination the most are those that were actually owned by Nathan. Over here, we have his Bible. We know that this is Nathan's Bible because he signed it and dated it. Nathan Hale, Coventry, June 6, 1772. He has also written in here, favorite text. Although it is a bit unclear, we can clearly see at the end, it's John, chapter 14, verse 3. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. The choice of this passage seems almost to foreshadow his death at an early age. The Bible sits on Johanna's secretary, which is filled with more of her china collection. During the summer of 1776 and into the fall, the house was under construction. But Nathan was in New York with Knowlton's Rangers under the command of General George Washington. The American forces had been defeated on Long Island. It was extremely important for General Washington to know the strength of the British forces. So he asked for a volunteer, and Nathan volunteered for a spy mission. With his boyhood friend, Stephen Hempstead, they departed for the coast. Upon getting into the boat, Nathan handed Stephen his silver shoe buckles, which we have right here. These are part of the artifacts that George Dudley Seymour was in constant quest for. But the ultimate prize for George is upstairs.
September 30th, afternoon. Ride to Reverend Strong's Salmon Brook. Hear a rumor that Captain Hale, belonging to the east side Connecticut River near Colchester, who was educated at college, was seen to hang on the enemy's lines at New York, being taken as a spy for reconnoitering their camp. Hope it is without foundation. Something troubling about it. Sleep not very well.
Nathan's mission to Long Island was ill-fated. He was captured and hanged by the British. A mere 21 years old, his final words, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country," became a symbol of the patriotism and loyalism of the time. This captured the imagination of George Dudley Seymour as a young boy. Let's go take a look at what we now refer to as the portrait room. Early research by George Dudley Seymour led him to the archives of the Connecticut Historical Society. And in those archives, he found a letter written by Rebecca Abbott, Nathan's niece. This chamber had been her room as a little girl. Upon her return in 1856, she wrote a letter that she was dismayed to find that the room had been painted and the shadow portrait covered. This sparked an interest in George Dudley. When the farm became available in 1913, he came to the Northwest Chamber with an artist friend. And they searched the door, scraped some paint, and found a line, and concluded that this must be the shadow portrait of Nathan Hale. They removed the door, took it back to New Haven, and had the paint stripped off of this area to reveal the shadow portrait of Nathan Hale, the only likeness of Hale known to exist. This bedchamber is one of 6 on the 2nd floor. Rooms on the 2nd floor in the 18th century were referred to as chambers, whereas a bedroom would have been a 1st floor room that had a bed in it. Now this bed is a superb example of an 18th century pencil post bed with Marlborough feet. However, it's not the only sleeping item that would have been in the room, for the house had anywhere from 14 to 25 people living in it at any one time. The children typically would have been sleeping on straw pallets that would have been scattered around the floor. It would have been a very hectic and chaotic living situation with virtually no privacy. In 1898, well before the discovery of the shadow portrait, George Dudley Seymour commissioned Bella Pratt to do a statue of Nathan Hale. He must have spent a considerable amount of time discussing Hale's image with this gifted sculptor, because the full-size bronze original was not cast until 1914. The original is located at Yale College. Replicas were made of this and are located at the CIA headquarters, the FBI building, Chicago Tribune, among other locations. We have the house and farm today because of Seymour's fascination with and admiration for the young soldier. This lucky accident of circumstances has given us this opportunity to open a window to the past. As we approach the 21st century, with the world changing so rapidly, it is important to keep a sharp eye on our country's heritage. While the conditions that form the foundation upon which our forefathers and mothers built this country are lost, we do have the tangible remains of their efforts. By examining these reminders of their existence, we have a sense of what and who made our country. So as George Dudley Seymour often quoted, "Oh, call back yesterday, bid time return." This is Wade Treadway. See you next time on America Open House. The Hale Homestead is open to the public from May 15th to October 15th. It is owned and maintained by the Antiquarian and Landmark Society and is one of 8 historic properties operated by the Society that are open to the public.